Hey YouTube, this is Travis here with TCS Star Frogs. Today I'm going to show you how to take an old tank that you could get off of Craigslist or from a garage sale, or maybe just an old tank that you're not using anymore, and take it apart and make a front opening vivarium out of it. I'm also going to show you how to build a Sherman vent as opposed to the European vents that most people use on the front opening vivariums. So let's get started. Step one is to take the old tank and disassemble it. For this build I'm using an old 40-gallon. So the first thing I do is put on my safety glasses, because the last thing you want is a small piece of glass or debris in your eye. And then I take the razor blade and I go around all the seams and remove all the old silicone. Once you get all the silicone out, you can take your putty knife and start to go around all the edges. Once you get the edges loosened up, you can start pulling on them. I'm not wearing any gloves here, but I do recommend wearing some protective gloves, as the glass around the edges can be quite sharp. This process can be time consuming and does take some patience. You also want to take your time to make sure that you don't crack any of the glass as you're pulling on the rim. Once you get the top rim off, you can flip the tank over and start using your putty knife to go around the edges of the bottom rim. Generally the bottom comes off much easier than the top. Now that you got the rim off, you're going to want to go ahead and clean up those seams a little bit more with the razor blade and make sure that they're as clean as you can get them, because you're going to try to separate the glass after this. So now that you have the edges all cleaned up, you want to take your feeler gauge, which is basically a really thin piece of metal, and try to work it in between the panes of glass. Sometimes this can be pretty difficult, and if you can't get the feeler gauge in there, sometimes you can run some fishing line in between to get a gap in between the glass. Now once you get it in there, you should just be able to slide it up and release that pane of glass, and you're just going to repeat that on all four corners. Once you have all four corners free, you should just be able to apply even pressure on the pane of glass and cut the seam of silicone at the bottom, and all the pane should come right off pretty easily at this point. Although this step should be pretty easy, you still want to be very careful, as the glass can be very sharp and it still could break if you apply too much pressure, so you want to take it pretty easy. Now that you have all your glass free, you can start cutting it into the lengths that you need. I use a straight edge and a marker to mark where I'm going to cut. And then I'll take a razor blade and clean up the area where I'm going to run my glass cutting tool so I get a nice clean etch. You want to make sure that your glass cutting tool, the wheel, lines up nice and even with your line, and then just apply firm pressure so that you get a good etch, and then flip the glass over, and you can apply pressure with a dowel or a broomstick, and the glass should just pop, giving you a nice clean cut. Then you want to go ahead and sand all those edges because they're going to be razor sharp. For smaller pieces of glass, instead of applying pressure to the opposite edge of the etch right away, you're going to want to use the back of the glass cutting tool to tap and make a run in the glass. This way, when you apply pressure, it'll make a much straighter line because small pieces of glass can be a lot trickier to cut. Once you have all the glass cut and measured that you need, you can go ahead and start building. The first thing I do when assembling the tank is apply painter's tape to the bottom pane of glass. This will help you secure the back and side panes of glass. Then you want to apply silicone to the bottom pane of glass and to the edges of the back piece of glass so that when you put the sides on, they will adhere to the back. Once you have that all squared up, you can go ahead and secure it with the tape. Once I've got the main structure of the tank done, I also like to apply tape to the corners to ensure that the glass doesn't go anywhere. After that, you can start applying silicone to the front and add in your front piece of glass. Also, you can see I'm being pretty sloppy here with the silicone. I'm not too worried about it, as most of this is going to be covered up by substrate and plants. After adding your silicone, you want to make sure to smooth all the silicone out to ensure that there's a watertight seal. And after that, you can add your top panes of glass. I should also add that you can wear some latex or nitrile gloves to protect your hands while applying the silicone. I prefer not to because I feel like the gloves get in the way. You may notice that I'm adding 2 panes of glass to the top. This is to create a gap towards the back of the tank so that I can put in some ventilation. And after I've got everything put together, I like to give it a once over and make sure everything looks square, make sure there's no gaps in the silicone to ensure that it's got a watertight seal, and just make sure everything looks good. Now I'm going to show you how to make the vent at the top of the tank. I'm going to start by putting 1 piece of glass in the gap on each side of the tank and siliconing it in place. After that dries for a little while, I'm going to go ahead and apply tape to both sides of the gap and cut your stainless steel mesh to fit the gap, silicone it all in place, and then you want to smooth out the silicone, making sure that it looks nice and clean. And once you're done with that, you want to remove the tape before the silicone dries. This will give you a nice clean look on the vent on the top of the tank. And here's what it looks like finished. So now I'm going to show you how to build the Sherman style vent for the front of the tank. You're going to want to take 2 1-inch strips of glass that run the length of the tank and apply the aluminum spacers in between those 2 pieces of glass. Once you've siliconed the vent assembly together, you're going to want to let it sit for a while to make sure that the silicone cures at least enough to where you can move it. After that, you're going to want to cut another piece of stainless steel mesh to fit the length of that. You want to silicone it in place and then use your small L channel to secure the screen. And I also like to use some more painter's tape to secure this while it's drying. Now that your Sherman vent is complete, you can go ahead and silicone it in place in the front of the vivarium. The portion with the L channel and the screen will go towards the back or the inside of the tank, and you want to make sure to get a really good seal on this because you're going to have to put the E channel on top of it and it will support the doors, so you want to make sure the silicone's in all the little cracks and crevices. You also want to check to make sure that it's nice and level once it's in there. Go ahead and measure and cut your E-track. The type of E-track that I'm using has an adhesive backing, so I don't need to glue it in place. I just cut it to the size needed and adhered it to the glass. The track or E-channel is referred to as E-channel because of the shape of it. If you're not familiar with this type of vivarium, the glass will sit in those channels. There'll be two pieces of glass and they'll slide like a sliding glass door. One of the last steps is to cut your aluminum angle iron. This step is optional. So I've flipped the tank over and I'm going to silicone some pieces of angle iron onto the bottom just to help protect the edges of the glass. Since this tank will be going on a baker rack, I'm only doing the sides. If I were going to do it on a stand, I would probably do all four sides. So for one of the last steps, I've made this little tool out of an old card. You could use a credit card or a gift card. And you want to cut little notches out of there so that when you run it over a bead of silicone, it will make a strip of silicone that runs in between the glass doors. This will make a fruit fly proof seal for the vivarium. Once you put your silicone down on the glass and run your card over it, you're going to want to go ahead and remove the tape. This will ensure that you have a nice clean strip of silicone. So this is what the strip will look like once you're done. And you can clean up the edges a little bit so it fits in the track better. So here it is all finished. The doors are in place and they slide nice and smoothly. Now I'm ready to start working on the background and plant it and put frogs in there. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about this build or have any suggestions for future videos, just let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And thanks again. Have a great day.